The former Stuttgart cultural manager Maria Kolesnikowa has to be imprisoned for many years after resisting the ruler Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. With the verdict, the apparatus in Minsk has once again shown itself to be unaffected by EU and US sanctions. During the protests against the ruler Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus, Maria Kolesnikowa was a symbol of freedom. Now the 39-year-old has to be in a prison camp for 11 years. A court in the capital Minsk sentenced the former Stuttgart cultural manager on Monday in a controversial case for alleged attempted illegal seizure of power. The lawyer who was charged with her, Maxim Snak, received 10 years imprisonment. After the verdict, there was massive international criticism, including from Germany. Kolesnikowa stood in a lattice cage behind glass in the court. Although she was handcuffed, her hands were shaped into a heart, her trademark. Nobody expected an acquittal. Nevertheless, Kolesnikowa appears energetic and cheerful in the courtroom, wrote civil rights activist Svetlana Tikhanovskaya on social networks. She sings, dances, smiles. In the course of the presidential election on August 9th of last year, Kolesnikowa became internationally known along with Tikhanovskaya and Veronika Tsepkalo. The other two women are in exile abroad. After the fraud allegations against the vote, Kolesnikowa joined the mass protests against Lukashenko. The rulers sometimes bloody suppressed the demonstrations and declared war on their opponents, also on Kolesnikowa. The activist and musician was kidnapped by the KGB Secret Service in Minsk at the beginning of September last year. When she was about to be deported to Ukraine, she tore up her passport shortly before the border crossing and thus thwarted plans to evict her from the country. For this, she received international recognition. The politician, who also speaks German, had repeatedly made it clear that the fight against Lukashenko would not be conducted from abroad. There have been no street protests in Belarus for months. Courts have imprisoned dozens of dissenters on behalf of the ruler. The trial of Kolesnikov and Snak, which began in early August, was just one of many. The negotiations took place behind closed doors. Only the verdict was public. Innocent, all Belarusians know that, only the court doesn't know, commented the opposition. The two political prisoners merely tried to change their country for the better. Kolesnikova and Snak called for democratic change, the resignation of Lukashenko, and a new presidential election. They were involved in the Coordination Council for a peaceful transfer of power. This is one of the reasons why the authorities targeted them in the first place. The lawyers of the two convicted want to challenge the decision before the Supreme Court in Belarus. There is no legal basis for a conviction, said the defense lawyers. The authorities of the authoritarian country had accused both of a conspiracy with the aim of an illegal seizure of power, as well as the establishment and management of an extremist association. The German federal government sharply criticized the rulings. For us, you are a symbol of the ruthless approach, the repression and intimidation of the Belarusian regime against opposition politicians and civil society, said a spokeswoman for the German Foreign Office. The judiciary in Belarus is being used for political persecution. The federal government demands the release of all political prisoners in Belarus, they said. As a consequence of the rulings, the Greens in the German Bundestag demanded humanitarian visas for those politically persecuted and an effective tightening of EU sanctions. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke of a politically motivated judgment that was shameful. Unfortunately, these judgments are further evidence of the regime's total disregard for human rights and fundamental freedoms of the Belarusian people, he complained. For British Foreign Minister Dominic Raab, the verdict confirms that the Belarusian authorities will continue their attack on the defenders of democracy and freedom. The human rights organization Amnesty International called the judgment arbitrary. The Austrian Foreign Ministry promised to continue to stand at the side of the democracy defenders. The expert Artyom Schreibman, who was fled abroad, now expects the West to further increase the pressure on the authoritarian power apparatus in Belarus. He says the opposition cannot get the prisoners out of prison themselves with their own troops. He told that to the Echo Moskwy radio station. The EU and the USA had repeatedly imposed sanctions on Belarus because of the action taken against those who think differently. The power apparatus in Minsk was always unaffected by this. Lukashenko, who is considered the last dictator in Europe, is supported primarily by Russian President Vladimir Putin. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.